Do you have too much spare sanity? So I have a 2005 Dodge Magnum. It's got about 250,000 miles on it, and the 5.7's been making glitter for about the last 6 months. So I decided I was going to get quirky, and I was going to put the entire drivetrain out of a Scat pack in it. And you might think, oh, just bring it over to the professional shop and have them pop the thing in and out in a weekend. But I'm not in that position, so we're going to sit here and we're going to grind out the entirety of a powertrain swap in about the span of a week. Now, the way that this swap works is thanks to the 2009 and 2010 model year of the LX platform. Now, this is a little bit of a sweet spot because they still have the older style body controllers with the newer style VVT equipped Gen 3 Hemis. Now, with that, you can just sit there and retune it to say, okay, you run a insert engine here, and you can just run whatever Gen 3 Hemi you want and whatever chassis. You can run Hellcat, Scat Pack, 5.7, take your pick. So at the end of the day, it'll be an '05 car with an '09 brain running a 2021 engine. Simple, right? And then we've got a couple more go-fast bits that are going to be sprinkled in for pizzazz along the way. Nothing too crazy, but you know, enough to make it sizzle. So this swap takes about a week, or at least it was originally supposed to take about a week, until a series of hurdles starts really chipping away at my desire to get out of bed in the morning. So by the end of all this, I was really forgetting to hit record a lot, and so I'm going to try and record through this to really walk through all of the stuff that I just forgot to record in the meantime, because at the end of this, I was really just thinking get the car on the road, not, you know, maybe I should record something for this video that I'm trying to make. Alrighty, it is day one of engine swap week. The Magnum has been cooling off at the shop overnight, and we've got to go pull all the refrigerant out of the AC system this morning. Yeah, today we just get to tear everything down, and after 3 years of denial, I finally get to admit that this is in fact a project car that I bought. Yeah, nothing's really happened yet, so we'll just see how it goes. Alright, screw up one of the day. I already forgot the camera that I was going to stick to the wall and then record all of the actual teardown process that was going to happen today, which unfortunately is going to be a lot of the fun stuff. So we're going to try and piecemeal it together with shit on my phone, and we will hope that it all turns out good. Just gonna get up under here, and we're gonna grab a little spoil of war here. Be needing that where we're going. Alright, so step one is all of that needs to go somewhere else. Yeah, fun times ahead. It is a little funny, after pushing 250,000 miles, you can see exactly which parts have not fared well, which parts have already need to be swapped out, and what stuff probably hasn't been touched since this thing rolled off the assembly line in '04. So, yeah, there's going to be a whole lot of fighting to get some of this stuff loose. I'm a little curious just about some of these little dealios. There's some stuff in here that probably should be more concerning than it is, but either way, it's all coming out anyway, so I can't say I'm too particularly concerned at this point. So most of day one is pretty easy. We're really just removing all the body panels, the bumper, the push bar that I've got on the front end of the car, and a lot of the day was mostly just spent discussing what we can do to drain fluids out, what's going to be good for the entirety of the project going forward, looking at what parts I may or may not have forgotten to buy in preparation for all this, but there was some genuine progress made. A lot of parts did come off, a lot of stuff was set aside for organizing, a lot of stuff went straight into the trash can. And for the most part, everything went pretty smoothly. There was nowhere near as many broken bolts as I thought there were going to be. And by the end of the day, we were ready to load the entire powertrain onto a pallet jack, which is not the best way to pull an engine, as I kind of figured out in this process, but at the end of the day, it did eventually come out. Alright, it is engine swap day 2. We're getting an earlier start than yesterday because we got a pretty good bit of stuff done, and we're trying to make sure we get everything done, all the big stuff done at least this weekend. Engine is out, transmission's out, and now we get to focus on the rear end and getting wiring ready. And
Yeah, then we get to start swapping out shifters and all this stuff on the interior. It is earlier than I'd like to be awake, for sure. But, I don't know. I can't tell if the tiredness is me waking up earlier or the fact that yesterday was long. But we will find out.
So the main focus of day 2 is to get all the rear suspension and all the other supporting pieces out of the car. It wasn't too hard of a process, just disassemble everything on the passenger side and the driver's side, make sure we didn't crack the brake lines so that the system would stay intact, and then just pull the whole thing. Really didn't have too many issues except for right about here. Yeah, it's really good for cameras when you do that. In fact, experts say you should do it often just to keep them on their toes.
Alrighty, it is day 3 of engine swap. Day 2 went alright. We got the rear end out. We got a whole lot of the electrical crap sorted out in the front. Day 3 is going to be mostly getting all the wires and all of the software crap put together so that the engine will actually start once we get it installed. And so far, I think everything ought to be going pretty good. There's one singular wire with the engine harness that needs to connect into the body harness, where I was told to put a wire where there was already a wire, and I was told that the wire that's there shouldn't be there. So I got to start calling into some people and see what's going on with that. But if I really had to take a whack at what's going to be problem of the day, it's going to be that. Other than that, it's going to be that. It's going to be getting hardware swapped out on stuff that came with terrible hardware from the factory. It's going to be getting everything prepped in order to receive said new engine, and I might actually get the shifter in by the end of the day, so that'll be the dopamine hit of the afternoon. And then other than that, it's going to be a little bit of a slower day because everything's going to be tiny, and then hopefully tomorrow we're sitting there popping this sucker into the engine bay. And then, yeah.
Alrighty, day 3. A lot to do. Alright, so big thing today is going to be a whole lot of wiring. I got to splice that plug into those plugs so that that can control that. It's going to be easier said than done because one of the plugs has got to go to a spot that already has a wire in it, which is not supposed to be a thing that exists. So it's time to call people. Alright, so I got the answers for the ECM. But now we're going to sit here and focus on the inside, because I've already started taking it apart, because that shifter needs to come out, and this one needs to go in. This is just an 8HP 70 shifter. Okay, this thing I'm actually proud of, so now y'all get to hear me info dump. So the big issue with the NAG1 shifter to an 8HP 70 shifter is that the 8HP 70 shifter is a whole lot smaller, mostly just because the 8HP 70 shifter is entirely electronic versus a NAG1 shifter that still has a physical cable going in there in order to determine whether the transmission is going into park, reverse, or drive, or neutral, or whatever you want to sit there and get crazy about it with. Now, the problem with that is that it makes the NAG1 shifter physically a lot bigger, and so in order to combat that, I designed this entire bracket to sit there and bolt into the stock footprint of a NAG1 shifter on the chassis side of the car, while then having the exact bolt pattern for an 8HP 70 shifter in order to bolt into it from the top. So what it all equals out to is that I've now got an 8HP 70 shifter that takes up the exact same footprint as the NAG1 shifter. It all comes to the factory height for the shifter, so it doesn't feel weird in the car, and I can sit there and I can put it together and it works. Right, so what we've got here is just a really simple bracket. I had to split it into 2 pieces in order to 3D print it. But we've got scan data from a NAG1 shifter that is all dimensionally correct, and scan data for an 8HP 70 shifter. Now what you can see is that for the NAG1 shifter, the footprint is the same and all the bolt holes line up. And then it is the same story for the 8HP 70 shifter, so that the whole thing now goes as one piece. And then the fun bit is that if you sit there and you look at the top of the shifters, they are at the same height. So everything just works. Alright, well apparently I still got it because that bolted in like it was meant to. So yeah, we've now got 8 HP shifter just kind of chilling. I think the neutral lockout's on. Just chilling where the NAG1 shifter used to be. Should be right about the same height too, so it'll actually look normal in the center console.
Alrighty, day 4. Forgot to film a whole lot on day 3 because it was mostly wiring. But on the good side, The wiring's mostly done. We've got to finish routing a couple things for the shifter and the transmission and all that sort of crap. But for the most part, the stuff needed to run the engine is all put together. And today it's just going to be a matter of getting a few little bits and pieces in order to fit, and then hopefully by the end of the day we'll be putting the transmission in. So fingers crossed we actually get there.
Alright, day 3. We've got the last little bits of prep work before that sucker gets slapped in there. Hopefully it'll be in by the end of the evening. In the meantime, we got to get all the peripherals ready, and that also includes new control arms. The original ones are shot, but we got these fancy boys, which unfortunately came with terrible hardware from the factory. So I got better hardware, but it's too long. So we got to make that fit, and then that can go in. And other than that, I think we've got some cleanup to do with the transmission tunnel. Some of the heat shielding's kind of not in the best shape ever. And we've got a couple other little bits and pieces that we got to get done on the front of the engine and all that sort of crap. And then honestly, yeah, this thing will probably be going in this evening. Should be sick. So the new hardware worked out pretty good on the A-arms, and for the rest of the day it was spent just getting the new engine shimmied into the engine bay, aligned, trying to get the cross member put together, and by the end of it we did in fact manage to get it bolted in for the most part. So right about now is where everything really starts to go wrong, and you're going to kind of find that out as the day progresses. But one thing that's really interesting in all of this is to sit there and note how my mood gets progressively abysmal throughout today, and then the full explanation will be in the next day's intro. So I'm going to just wait until then, but this is where it all hits the fan.
Alright, big day yesterday. The engine's actually in the car, so now we gotta sit there and we gotta hook up everything, but unfortunately there's one thing we've got to take care of first, and that is when I bought the engine, the guy that I bought it from claimed that he had the cross member for the car, and when I showed up, it was not attached to it, but it looked like the right part. Turns out it was actually off of a 5-speed car from, I don't know, like 2011, 2014, whatever. Anyway, it don't fit. So I gotta go running around the city and try and find car. Gotta go find somebody that's got one out of a newer car that I can sit there and use to actually get the transmission fitted, because the engine's in, but the transmission's sitting on a jack stand right now. So we gotta get that sorted, and then I can get around to hooking in all the engine, coolant lines, fluid lines, whatever. And then we can start getting the drive shaft and the rear end in, and then hopefully, maybe not today, but tomorrow, we can have the thing started up, because it turns out we've also got to have the transmission wired in and running in order to actually get the thing to start, or else the computer's going to freak out and it's not going to start the engine because it thinks the car's not in park. Whole lot of crap going on with that, but we are officially at the putting things back together stage, which is big. So I now need to go chase down some random dude in the south side of the city that's got a V6 car that I'm assuming somebody wrecked, and I'm not asking questions past that.
Boy, I wish it had been that simple. Yeah, so right after recording that intro, I went on to have one of the worst experiences with part acquisition I've ever had, and it also didn't help that I just so happened to be recording this on my birthday when I was doing all of this, so that really was just kind of salt in the wound. I am in about the worst mood I've been in years as I'm going about all of this, and I'm basically just trying to forget the rest of the day, which I'll tell you about in a sec. Yeah, it was bad.
Okay, so yesterday almost broke me for a lot of reasons. So, after we got the engine put in, we found out that the cross member that came with the engine transmission package I bought was wrong. When I bought the thing, the guy at the dismantling yard was sitting there, and I asked him, "Hey, do you have the transmission cross member?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure we do." And he takes the cross member that I had and he just puts it with it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I don't really have any foreknowledge to argue with that. Well, it turns out we go to put it in and it doesn't fit. And we start looking around, and the thing had been kind of scraped up, so you couldn't read the part number. But we find pictures of it and find out it's actually off of a 5-speed car, which means it's not going to fit the 8-speed that we've got. So it's like, okay, oh well, I got to get a new transmission cross member. How bad could this be? Famous last words. So I find a couple different other yards that claim that they have a part that matches all of Chrysler's interchange sheets as for what's going to fit this car. And I set out first thing in the morning, I'm going to go pick up one of these parts from one of the local yards. I get there, and I'm like, hey, I'm the guy that called about the transmission cross member, and he's like, oh yeah, cool, we already got the thing pulled aside and ready for you. And the guy walks out with the exact same part that I've already got, which is about where the day starts going downhill. Everything in their little interchange record says that this should be a part that fits any charger, and it's like, well, I imagine it does. It fits bolt holes on the chassis, but it doesn't line up with the transmission. And what we later found out is that Chrysler just does an absolutely terrible job of documenting that there are actually different transmission cross members depending on different transmission options, even for the same chassis. So he gives me a couple different phone numbers of a few different parts yards in the city that have listings for the transmission that I have, and it's like, oh, maybe you can call them and get the cross member. So I start calling people. I find everybody wants too much money for this. It's ridiculous. But I find 2 yards that claim they have the part, and I start driving over to the lower price of the 2 yards, and turns out it's the exact same people I bought the engine and transmission of. So I'm like, okay, can these people get redemption? Well, I get there, and I'm like, okay, hey, I called about the transmission cross member, and he's like, hey, let me get the guy to go get it for you. Guy comes out, I don't know where they got this part. It's very clearly not the right part. It does not resemble the part that I've already got. It does not resemble the picture in the parts catalog as to what this part is supposed to look like. I don't know where they got it, but it's not the right part. And I sit there and I try to say, look, this isn't the right part. It's supposed to look like this. And the issue is the cross member for the 6.4 is shared with the cross member for the 5.7. And so the picture that I had pulled up was for an eBay listing for the cross member off the 5.7. So this guy's like, oh yeah, no, it's the wrong part. That's off of the 5.7. And I'm like, yeah, but they've got the same transmission. And he's like, no, but this is the one you need. And I'm like, buddy, this isn't the wrong thing. You can tell, like, this one's symmetrical, and the one you just gave me clearly has a long side and a short side. This one doesn't work. And so this goes on for a while, and it gets to the point where dude at the parts yard starts taking shots at me, where it's like, oh yeah, you can get, if you can get it, and it's like, I can go get you one off of a 5.7, but when you come back saying it's the wrong part, we're all gonna laugh at you. And I'm like, huh? So either way, the guy ends up saying like, oh, since you already bought the transmission from us, we'll cut you a deal, and it's like $100. And I'm like, okay, no, sure, let's do this. I'll take the receipt from this. I'm gonna come back with pictures showing you this is the wrong part, and then we're gonna see who's really laughing at who. So I'm sitting there waiting to check out, and eventually the yard manager just comes over and says, dude, you're good, just go. And I'm like, okay, well, that kind of ruins the revenge plot, but I'll take free aluminum. So I head out of there, and it's like, well, that solved the problem of this horrifyingly bad interaction that I just had. But now I still need a transmission cross member. So I start calling every part yard and find out that apparently people don't save transmission cross members. Whenever they get in a wrecked car from an auction and they just start getting their components to resell off of them, they grab big stuff, and any little brackets get thrown in the trash. And which is just baffling to me, because it's like, that's just money you're throwing away. But either way, nobody has this part, and eventually it gets to the point where I gotta start like finding the little mom and pop yards that are probably don't have business licenses off of Facebook, and I finally find one guy that I can meet up with and eventually get the right part. And oh my gosh, that turned into an ordeal. It was like, so I'm usually, after I leave my house, I'm usually over at the shop by sometime around 10. It took me until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon just to get to the shop, and then I didn't have the correct part until closing in on 6, 7. So it was a very long night last night trying to salvage any sort of portion of the usable workday, and I was in a horrendous mood. So Either way, we managed to pull it together. We got some of the front suspension back together. We got some of the stuff on the engine hooked up, and I've got this laundry list of stuff that I got to get done today if I want to actually hear this thing run. So we are gonna try and salvage the schedule here, but oh my gosh, make like notes for the future. If you ever buy an engine transmission assembly off of somebody for a swap, make damn sure it's got all the little details with it, because if you don't get it right then, you probably never will.
Alright, we have been doing things. Started getting front suspension put back together. Engine is in. And that's the to-do list for today in order to get this thing to crank. So hopefully this thing's making noise by the time I gotta leave here today. It wasn't. So this is where the project starts getting a little bit weird, because it had been thrown so off schedule by the transmission crossmember fiasco. In the end, I really just kind of stopped remembering to record things because I was too paranoid trying to keep the thing on schedule. Because at the end of the day, this was supposed to be a transmission swap, or an entire powertrain swap that all happened in a week. And so really getting off of that time frame was kind of messing with my head, and I just kind of forgot to hit record a couple times. So at this point, I'm going to try and walk through it as best that I can, but know that there's probably going to be a couple gaps in the story from here on out. Alright, big day today. This thing needs to start because it's really close and I'm running out of time. So first thing is going to be wire the transmission, because I keep putting it off and I need to do it, and I'm currently the cleanest I'm about to be today, so I won't screw up the inside. So all that needs to get sorted. I gotta get the AM lines run for the oil cooler, and then I gotta finish out the little evap purge in the back, which I don't even know if this tune even uses it, but I don't want to sit there and have it not hooked up in the event that something happens. But either way, that'll be stuff for today. Realistically, this thing should be really close to cranking. It's just a matter of I gotta hook up the last couple lines and hoses, and that's really it. So hopefully sometime today we'll have a first start. Okay, so here's where the real fun part actually starts, because most of the mechanic work is done. Me of the past is about to sit here and start talking about how we had to trick the engine into cranking by plugging the old 5-speed shifter back into the wiring harness for the rest of the car, but that we didn't actually try firing the thing up because, you know, late nights, old people, ordinances, etc., whatever. What I'm about to find out through this entire process is that the car's not going to start regardless, because there's actually a whole lot of programming issues that are going on with my transmission controller at this time that I don't know about. We do eventually get those solved, but it ends up becoming a running theme in this entire build that the transmission's tuned incorrectly, and I need to keep loading files into it in order to get the car to work. Alrighty, day 8, this is where things get interesting. So we got the thing to crank over last night. Didn't start it up fully because by the time we got it going, it would have been open headers at like 10 o'clock at night. So we're going to be doing that first thing this morning. Problem is the transmission's not getting proper CAN signals, and it's sitting here trying to do a safety lockout, and the only way to get the thing to crank over is to plug the shifter from the 5-speed back into it. So there's some kind of signal it's not getting. I don't know if it's just a matter of the shifter I bought is malfunctioning, because at the end of the day I bought a used shifter. It could just be bad. The shifter's fine, I'm just stupid. Or if it's not getting the proper signals over the CAN bus network on the rest of the car. So we're gonna do a little troubleshooting today, and we're gonna see if we can't figure out what's wrong with that, because it's now Saturday and all the people that actually know how to fix this are closed. That, my friends, is someone who has yet to lie to the service rep at a dealership, which is what makes it interesting. But we're going to see if we can at least get some kind of pulse going on the transmission, and we have pretty good faith that everything with the engine's going good right now. So let's see what happens with that. Alright, so it turns out the problem here is that I was sent two different transmission controllers. One by the guy that was doing my actual transmission tuning, one by the guy that was doing my engine tuning, because these are two different people. The guy that did the transmission tuning was telling me that this was going to be a plug-and-play kit, and all I had to do was connect the wires and it would just work. What he meant to tell me was that it was a plug-and-play kit after I load a tune file onto it. So he sent me a tune file and I got that working eventually. But in the meantime, I had another transmission controller from the guy that did my engine tuning. Now, the guy that did my engine tuning had forgotten what transmission I told him I was going to put in the car, and he sent me a controller that was tuned for a stick shift car. Now, that lets the car start and it lets the engine run, but it won't control an automatic transmission because it's not tuned to control an automatic transmission. So the way that I had first gotten all this to run is that I was trying to use a completely unprogrammed controller that I got from the transmission guy, and I put all this together and it wouldn't work. So he had told me this little trick where I could plug the shifter for the old 5-speed back into the car and use that in order to get it to start in a pinch, but it would run in limp mode, blah, 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 blah. Either way, so I got that to run, and it was sitting there throwing all these codes for like no communication to transmission controller, no transmission detected, blah, 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 whatever. So everybody's closed. It's a Saturday. And the only people that have any knowledge about Chrysler products whatsoever is going to be a local Dodge dealership. So what I ended up doing is I called into the service counter and I pretended to be some guy that had the scary light on his car come on and he didn't know what was wrong, and I had them sit there and walk me through what potentially would need to be checked and replaced, and then I just went and used that for troubleshooting on my own car. No, they were great people, they were helpful, but at the end of the day I did entirely lie to them as to why I was calling. But I did end up finding out that it was because my transmission controller just had zero communication on it whatsoever because it didn't know what it was doing. So I switched over to the one that was programmed to a stick shift, which I didn't know was programmed to a stick shift, and that let the car start without using the 5-speed shifter, but it wouldn't go into gear, because who would have thought you need to have a controller that's programmed to say put an automatic into gear in order to put an automatic into gear. Makes sense. So that was a whole runaround, and then I eventually realized, oh my gosh, this is tuned wrong. I went and finally read the instructions that I was sent with the transmission controller that say, hey, stupid, put the tune file on before you try to run this, because guess who doesn't know how to read? So we got all that put together, and we eventually did get the car to start, but it was a huge runaround because I don't know jack about computers, and I also don't know how to read, apparently.
Alrighty, day 8.
Apparently I can't count either.
Engine runs. Turns out the issue with the transmission controller was that it just had a bad tune file on it, or maybe it just wasn't set up properly. But by sheer force of luck, I happen to have a second transmission controller that came with the engine wiring harness, and we swapped that out and plugged it in, and the thing fired right up like you wouldn't believe. It runs. We still gotta fill up the transmission because it's got like maybe 4 quarts out of the 10 quarts that it's supposed to have. And there was just a lot of stuff that was disassembled yesterday when we got everything running, so we still have yet to be able to put it into gear, confirm that it'll go into drive, things like that. it's sending all the right signals to the rest of the car. Like, you can manually disengage all of the safety bullcrap and sit there and put the thing into like neutral, reverse, whatever, and it'll like activate backup cameras and things of that nature. So it's sending the right signals out there. We just got to make sure that the right signals are getting picked up. So
Gee, I wonder what's wrong.
we got to get things like the drive shaft put in. We got to finish the exhaust because it's been running open headers and it's deafening. And then we gotta bleed the brakes because we had to crack them open in order to get the rear end off. We gotta fill the transmission with oil. We gotta tighten up all the bolts that were maybe forgotten in the assembly process. And then, yeah, just kind of finish putting everything together. It'll probably be next weekend before we can get the thing aligned. It's because it's Sunday right now, and by the time we get all of this done, I don't think any alignment shops are going to be open. So test drives are going to have to wait a little bit, but for the most part, I think this is going to get wrapped up today. Hopefully by early afternoon. Knowing our timelines, it's probably going to be later this evening. But either way, yeah, for the most part, that is a Hemi swap in almost a week. It took slightly longer than expected. I'm still blaming the transmission crossmember that I think killed just all of Wednesday. But either way, no, it's together. It kind of sucked. Exhaustion is fully set in. All of the tendons, like, in my hand are sore because I've just been gripping bolts all week, and it just hurts to curl my fingers now. And it, like, everything that could be used to work on a car is just sore right now. It's, ugh. Especially with after the transmission deal, because once all the setbacks got put into play, it started turning into late nights every night in order to keep progress going on this. I've been wrapping up at like 1 in the morning for these last couple days, and then waking up at 6 the next day in order to get in and wrench all day. So it's a lot, but no, turns out you can do it in a week with a home shop. I wouldn't suggest it. I would get a lift and schedule a month. Schedule a month, do it slow, get a lift, and don't off yourself in the process, because oh my gosh, there were some times where I wanted to set this thing on fire. But either way, it's together. We'll hopefully be able to drive it around the neighborhood or something, and then it'll be roadworthy once we actually get it aligned. But yeah, that's it.
We are on the last day of engine swap week. Motor is in the car, it runs. I got to plastic weld the intake back together because the throttle body's in a completely different spot, so we had to kind of cut up my original tube, which kind of sucks because it was expensive, but it was made for a different engine, so oh well. The rear end is all in, springs are in, shocks are in. Drive shaft is still over in a corner, and that needs to go back on. The front end of the car needs to go back together. Interior's got to get reassembled. We got to bleed the transmission. In theory, that ought to be it. We're hoping that it's having a weird thing with the safety interlock.
No. Just no.
To where you might need to cheese that in order to get it to work, but the shifter's sending signals to the rest of the car that everything's going into gear properly, so at least that's working.
It's not.
So yeah, anyway, wrapping it up. Hopefully this thing's maybe not roadworthy because all the alignment shops are closed today, but hopefully it's able to move under its own power again by end of the day.
Yeah, that didn't happen. Instead, you get this.
Okay, so it's like a week later. We finally figured out why the transmission wouldn't go into gear. Turns out it was tuned for a stick shift because reasons. Either way, the bigger issue we found is that while we were putting everything together, I completely forgot that there's supposed to be a big old battery cable coming off the back of the alternator going into the same wire that we're feeding the starter out of so that it can go back in and charge the rest of the system. So every time we've had this thing idling, it's just been absolutely eating the battery. So that needs to get fixed. And then we can actually move on to bleeding brakes and filling transmissions and doing things that'll get the engine hot. So, yay?
So here's the part where I figure out what's actually going on with the transmission. This is also the part where it stops being an official 1-week engine swap. Because by now I have used up the entire week that I allotted to do this. I have to go back into work and life and things of that nature. And unfortunately for me, I also had to travel out of state for about the next week. So while I was out, I was luckily able to sit there and get in contact with people that actually knew what they were doing. I was able to figure out that my tuning issue was actually a tuning issue, and by the time I got back, we were able to just put everything together and have it work. Now, what I will say is this ended up being a massive undertaking. Could it have been done in a week had I not had the hiccups that I did? Yeah, definitely. Do I recommend anybody do this in a week? Absolutely not. Give yourself proper time and proper tooling in order to do it. That being said, it was an experience that I definitely enjoyed, and I'm glad that I did it. It's wild to think about now because it was so much work in 1 week, and I was not in a good state of mind by the end of it because everything was just getting into sleep deprivation and exhaustion and all that sort of crap, and I was scrubbing grease out of my fingernails for the next 3 weeks. But looking back on it now, it is a fun trip. I would try doing it again, knowing what I know now. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'd say it all ended up working out, which, yay. But now for the moment that I know everybody's been waiting for. So anyway, that was a Hemi swap in almost a week. It will definitely happen again because you can't stop me. And whenever it does happen again, I will be sure to see you all in therapy.